Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the wonderful, soon-to-be married youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. It's close, my friend. It's really, really close.
Yeah, it can't get much closer. This is the last show that I'll be doing with you, Troy, for a couple weeks, right? 2 weeks? Yeah. So next week's show, I will be off. Troy will be manhandling the show on his own, and I'm sure putting together a quality show for you listeners. And then I will be back 2 weeks from now. I know next week we're doing our little, Big Ten 2018 football preview, going a little more in depth on teams, not crazy in depth, but a little more in depth on what to look for. And so last week we had the worst four teams of the Big Ten in terms of where they were in the standings a year ago. Today we're doing the next four worst teams, I guess teams ranked 7 through 10 in the conference. And then, again, next week Troy's doing something on his own. 2 weeks from now we'll have the next four, and then we'll wrap it up August 27th. I believe that is right before the season starts with Ohio State and Wisconsin, the top two from a year ago. But, yeah, my wedding is, 6 days? Yeah, 6 days away now. So
yeah,
I've got not much time left.
No, not much time. Not much time. There's no turning back now.
Oh no. Plenty of people would be pissed at me at this point if I turn back.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do now. You are on your way. You are on your way. I'll tell you what, my friend. I was telling you in the pregame, it is hotter than Grandma's kitchen up here in Northeast or the Northeast. It is just the unbearable humid weather, and I know you deal with it all the time, but for us Northeast folk, this is ridiculous. And you know my situation. I got a new car, air conditioner was working, now it doesn't work. So it's crazy hot. I don't like it. I'm a 70s, 80s degree guy, not this humid crap they got going on, but like you said, we got a great show today. We're going to try to keep it rather quick. 4 teams, go over, 7 through 10. Now let's see if any of these teams might surprise people this year. I'm going to turn it back over to you, youngster. Take it away.
Yeah, it's hard to, honestly, we talked about it on last week, though, that we had teams, or we're assuming that teams next year anyway, the top of the conference has like 5, 6 potentially really strong teams. This week's show, we might be talking about teams who may not, I guess, completely shock people in terms of what they're going to do this year, like, fight for the top of the conference. Like today's show, for example, we're talking about Rutgers, we're talking about Nebraska, first year under Scott Frost, talking about Purdue, talking about Iowa. Are those teams going to compete with Wisconsin and Penn State and Ohio State? Probably not. Can they shock any of those teams on any given Saturday? Absolutely. We saw it a year ago when Iowa beat Ohio State by 40. So anything is possible in college football, especially this competitive conference that I think is the best in college football, again, top to bottom. But so these teams they're starting to get better. Last year it was kind of a disaster, or last week it was kind of a disaster with the teams we talked about. A lot of injuries for those teams, to be honest. These teams, not necessarily injury-riddled much, but in terms of talent, again, there's just something to be had for all these teams. And so, again, talking about Rutgers, Nebraska, Purdue, and Iowa today. Also on the show bio, if you look below, if you're watching or listening to this show on thegruelingtruth.net, you will be able to see little timestamps as far as, when we start the show, and how much roughly, minutes into the show that you can fast forward to whatever team basically you're really interested in listening about. But so we'll start with Rutgers. And Rutgers, again, you could say they were the 5th worst team in the Big Ten last year. You could say they were the 6th worst team in the Big Ten last year. They were 3-6 in conference. Better, again, than Minnesota, Indiana, Maryland, Illinois. They were tied with Nebraska a year ago. And I literally could have, flipped these two teams in terms of where they finished, because both finished 3-6, both finished 4-8 overall. Rutgers football last year was as competent as Nebraska football. Which for Nebraska fans, I mean, if you're listening to that, you've got to be like, holy cow, you've got to be kidding me. You know, you might have known that.
That's why there's a new sheriff in town in Nebraska. That's why there's a new sheriff. Because we're going to talk about Nebraska here in a little bit, but for us to be talking about Nebraska on day 2 in teams 7 through 10, that is unacceptable to Nebraska and Nebraska fans. Yeah.
I mean, they're right there with Rutgers. I could have been talking about Nebraska first and Rutgers second. Literally, it makes no difference. Both finished with the same exact records, out of conference and conference. But so we're going to start with Rutgers at the 10 spot a year ago, tied for 9th, I guess, if you want to put it that way. Basically, in terms of rankings, passing offense, rushing offense, total offense, scoring offense, and then the same categories defensively, they were pretty poor everywhere, to be honest. They won a few games a year ago, beating Morgan State, beating Illinois, beating Purdue, beating Maryland. It's just a bunch of the bottom of, the Big Ten and Morgan State. I mean, that's what they did. Granted, again, they won 3 Big Ten games, but they didn't pull off any huge surprises necessarily a year ago, and that's part of it. We talk about it in basketball all the time on this show when men's basketball is around, and we switch our gears from football to basketball. We talk about the scheduling and how it's not fair at all this year upcoming in the men's basketball season for the Big Ten. 20 Big Ten games are going to be played, so there will be more of a balance. It's still not going to be perfect in terms of fairness, and I don't think it ever will in any sport in terms of being fair scheduling year after year after year. But in any case, Rutgers this year returns 6 offensive starters, returns 8 defensive starters, which, again, like last week's show, we talked about, hey, this team returns, 9 guys on defense. Well, okay, but if they were bad defensively a year ago, maybe that's not a fantastic thing to have so many guys returning on that side of the ball. Not to say that Rutgers defense will be atrocious, because, again, last year they ranked, I'll just read it off, scoring, rushing, passing total. They ranked 76th nationally, 84th rushing, 55th passing, 72nd total. Not good, but it's not atrocious. I mean, like we talked about some of the teams a week ago, we will talk about some of the teams this week, ranking in the 110s, 120s, 100s nationally. Rutgers was just below average, basically a year ago and everything. But new offensive coordinator this year, a big thing for this program going forward, and it's, to me, a lot like Wisconsin, where they can really take that next step up, is getting a big quarterback recruit. Not that Rutgers has, the top quarterback coming in this year, but he is a top 20 quarterback recruit, Artur Sitkowski. He's a pro-style guy. He's going to be a freshman this year. He's on the team. But senior quarterback Gio Resigno returns, who was, he was not fantastic a year ago. But he's a senior. I'm assuming that the freshman will not beat out the senior for week 1, although I guess if he impresses enough, maybe he will. Maybe Rutgers wants to get a jolt in there. I'm curious for you, Troy. If you had, let's say, a very average team one season. I know you coach D2 soccer, any of your soccer seasons. Let's say you had a program and they were very mediocre. And then you've got a returning senior starter who was very mediocre returning. But you bring in this freshman that you like a lot. I guess it depends, obviously, case by case. But
I won't use college. I'll use high school. Okay. I took over a high school program that was a team that usually made the playoffs, but usually in the middle of the pack in the conference. And I started building a theater program in the summer. And I started coaching U12 boys, so I could coach them 2 or 3 years before they got to high school. I couldn't coach them once they got to high school. I could not coach them. So when I took over, I had a similar situation where I had some seniors, some juniors, some guys that were on the team. And literally what I did that first year, Kevin, I had freshmen on varsity, I had sophomores on varsity, and I'm talking significant playing time, some of them even starting. And the reason was we can plot along, and it's totally different even in high school. We can plot along and we can be, 14-8 14-7, be the 4th seed in the regional playoff and play against the number 1 seed. Why?
Right.
Why would I want to wait to get these kids on the field?
Yeah.
I'll throw them in the fire. And if we struggle, we struggle. But in the long run, I've got these kids on my team for 4 years, and I had a good core. I mean, I'll share a story, and I know fans may love my stories, may dislike my stories. The summer team I took over, Kevin, that was basically made up of all my high school guys. The year before I took that team over, they won a handful of games, 4 or 5 games. And I'm not saying that I'm this awesome coach that came in, but I was a coach that came in that really took a style. I had a certain style. I wanted them to play. At 11 and 12 years old, they were going to play the system that I coached in high school, because that's why I took over the team. I wanted to coach them for 2 or 3 years in my system so that when they came to high school, they were familiar with the system.
Yeah.
And so I changed the system, but I had also told you one thing about coaching that I think is very important. I think I said it on the XFL show, is getting a coach that is going to take the skill set of his players or her players and then incorporate that into your style of play. And that's what I did with these young kids. And the next year, we were very good. It's a team that's going to tournament playoffs, and this was a team that I think won 1 or 2 tournament games all summer. They're now playing in tournament playoff games. They're winning tournaments. They're in championship games of tournaments. And the reason I wanted to share that story is because that was the guys that stepped on the field as freshmen.
Right.
They knew the system. They were talented. And so if they were equally or more talented than upperclassmen, I had a very hard conversation with some of those juniors and seniors and said, look, you're not guaranteed a starting spot as you were last year. These kids are coming in. This freshman's much better than you. The freshman's playing. So you can decide if you want to accept that or if you do not want to play on my team. And some of them accepted it. Some of them understood. Others, like, this is a crock. And fine. You don't have to be on my team. That's
right.
simple. And that was at a high school level, Kevin. And you know that sometimes high school athletics, it's all about, oh, you got to play these kids. No. I was at a school that the athletic director was very aware of what I wanted to do, and that I wanted to have a winning team, a team that was going to compete for conference titles, and a chance to go to state tournaments. Not a team that's just going to field a team and say, oh, you're a junior, you get to play. No, I didn't believe in that. And like I told the AD, if that's what you want, I won't be the coach, because I refuse to lose. So where you're going with that is, what should Rutgers do? And I think Rutgers should play the best players regardless of what year they are in school. They have to. You're not going to be any worse than you were. I mean, you could be worse than you were last year. You could fall to the bottom of the conference. You have to play the best players, whether they're freshmen, whether they're seniors, redshirt seniors, whatever they are. Rutgers needs to play the best players when they're ready, because you're talking about a freshman quarterback. And if that freshman quarterback does not know the offense inside and out, you don't play him.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that he understands the offense, because the second thing, and what goes through your head as a coach with the young guys, what if they don't have success? Are you going to hamper their development? And that really was something I had to debate with playing freshmen on varsity. Now, some of those guys in high school, you can play varsity, but if you don't play, it's all about games played in minutes. If they suited up for varsity and didn't play, I could give them a JV game. And so a lot of them got to go back down, and they got to play on the JV, and I pull them up for varsity. But then if I used them on varsity, I had to eliminate a JV game, which was fine. But that's how I worked it with the young kids. But, you know, those kids got up, and a lot of them that were on my team, I think it was like 4 or 5 of them had significant playing time as freshmen. I think 1 started, and then the next year I had 5 sophomores that started on the varsity team. So these kids have to be ready to play, Kevin, But if they're ready to play and they understand the offense, they understand the defense, whatever position they play, you play the best players. Hopefully that answered your question.
Answered it perfectly. There's no need for me to add on to that. It's exactly how I feel to plot along, go 4-8 again, go 5-7 even. Wahoo! Who cares? If your freshman quarterback, whenever he's ready, week 1, week 2, week 5, week 8, week 10, week 12, whatever, especially now in today's college football game where you can play Artur Sitkowski in 4 games and have him not see the field in the other 8, and he can take this year as a redshirt year by still playing in 4 games, absolutely do that. If that's where it is, if he's ready week 3, and he's looking better than the senior, then so be it, But if he's ready to play in 2, 3, 4 games at the end of the year, throw him in there. Hey, look, you got yourself a redshirt year, even though you played the third of the season. I mean, it's awesome for some of these kids, for sure.
Yeah, but you don't want to get the old man started on that rule.
Okay.
You don't want to get me started on that rule. But for teams like Rutgers, it actually is very beneficial because some of these young kids can play when the season is already basically done. But I guess I want to say this, Kevin. I look at Rutgers and where they were. Could they win 6 games? I mean, I didn't look at their non-conference schedule. You're going to go over it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they go out and play hard. Like you said, defensively not great. But could they take another step forward and win 6 games and possibly get to a bowl? I mean, that's the question. And how do you do that? You don't play guys out of seniority. You play the best guys. And I know that we talked about Rutgers and being able to go out and recruit, having pulled off, a couple Big Ten wins. It's not like they're going out recruiting saying, oh, yeah, we are the bottom of the Big Ten.
Right.
They can go out there now and recruit, and they're not going to go get 5 stars. But they're going to be able to go out and they're going to recruit amongst the other teams that are in the same area as them. And I'm talking about in the 7, 8, 9, 10 spot.
Sure.
And go out and say, look, we're making positive strides forward. Come play for us. So if they can get a couple of good recruiting classes, jeepers, maybe they could get up to all of a sudden that 6-6 record and get into a bowl. And for Rutgers, that would be the next logical step. That's where they're looking to go. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I mean, if a kid is looking to play in the Big Ten and they're interested in Minnesota, Rutgers can say, we had a better record than them. Indiana, we had a better record than them. Maryland, we had a better record than them. Illinois, we had a better record than them. Nebraska, we had the same exact record as them. And that's Nebraska. Obviously, the 2 programs are different in terms of tradition and what Scott Frost has done at other places. Now coming to Nebraska, you can buy more into Scott Frost turning Nebraska around than Chris Ash at Rutgers. This is Chris Ash's 3rd year at Rutgers now, just to go over a few bullet points before their schedule, before we move on to Nebraska here. The running game could be decent. They have an incoming transfer who was solid from, I think it was Boston College a year ago. Raheem Blackshear showed some things as a freshman a year ago at Rutgers. Now he's back as a sophomore, obviously. So they've got a couple capable running backs, 3 returning offensive linemen. I think it's 3 returning guys in the secondary who are all seniors. So they've got some areas of decency in terms of being a team. This isn't just, oh, this is Rutgers, they suck. Honestly, because that's what most people think. But it wasn't like that a year ago. Like you said, Troy, they played hard. They won 3 games in the Big Ten. They won 4 total. To win 2 more, there you go. You're in a bowl game. To win 1 more, you have a chance at 5-7. As ridiculous as it is, to go into their 2018 schedule, they have a lot of winnable opportunities early. I'll say that. They start with Texas State. That's winnable. Then they play at Ohio State. That's probably not winnable. After that, though, they play Kansas, they play Buffalo, they play Indiana, they play Illinois, they play Maryland. Okay. Those are winnable games. The final, 5 games, Northwestern, at Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State, at Michigan State. The final 5 games for them are going to be rough. There's no doubt about it. But the first 7 outside of Ohio State, they're all winnable. So 6 games, 6 games, very winnable. If you pull off an upset against Northwestern, against whoever, I think winning 6 games is possible. I wouldn't say it's probable, but I think it's absolutely possible. You know, if I had to predict, I'd say something like 4-8. But I think winning 6 games is possible if all goes well for Rutgers.
Don't give them an automatic win against that Buffalo team there, youngster. You know who coaches Buffalo.
Yes, I do. As odd as that is for the listeners, if you don't know, I know the head coach at Buffalo pretty well. Thanks to UW Whitewater.
Well, and the thing is, Kevin, I look at Buffalo, and I look at what coach is going to do there. He's not going to turn it into a national contender, but that's going to be a Buffalo team that's not going to be a pushover in any of these non-conference games. And then you get a game like Rutgers on the schedule. You say that's winnable for Rutgers. It's also winnable for Buffalo.
Yeah.
We know what coach can do over there. He's going to go recruit to people that are going to play, and he's going to get his kids playing football. That's a winnable game for Buffalo. It is also a winnable game for Rutgers, though. So I just wanted to throw it out there. You can share with the listeners what we're talking about and why we're so intrigued with Buffalo.
Yeah, during my time at college, it was at UW Whitewater, a Division III school, but it was a powerhouse in terms of many different sports. Football, they went on a ridiculous run while I was there. Coach Leipold, Lance Leipold, was the coach at the time during this run where they won, 3 titles in 5 years, 4 titles in 5 years, whatever it was. They were absurd during my time there. And then from UW Whitewater, he went and got a job at Buffalo. You know, not Morgan State, not Delaware State, not Troy, not wherever, you know, Long Beach State, at Buffalo. I mean, a not top-tier MAC program, but it's a MAC program that people have heard of, you know. It's not Alabama AT&T, you know, Western, Southeastern State Tech. You know, it's Buffalo. It's a legitimate Division I job. Not a Power 5 job, but it's a legitimate Division I job. To make the jump from D3 to D1, hats off to him. I think it's phenomenal. I think he deserved it. He's had a rough year at Buffalo. He's had a decent year at Buffalo. I think this is year 3. It might be year 4 now. But they're not going to be a complete pushover. But I'll say that much. So anyway, I know what that coach is all about and what he preaches and what they're going to try to do, unless he has magically changed his philosophy from Wisconsin to the state of New York. Which I don't think he has. I'm sure he's got the same principles in mind. But so, like you said, Troy, winnable game for Rutgers, winnable game for Buffalo, 2 Northeastern schools in the country. But I know that Lance Leipold said, hey, we can pull this Northeastern school, quote unquote, geographically, but they're a Big Ten school. So he knows about the Big Ten and the region, obviously, being at University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Anyway, that's all I got for Rutgers. Again, a very tough schedule at the end, a very winnable schedule in the beginning. So it'll be interesting to see where this team starts off. If they start off a little rocky, it's not going to end well. I'll say that much. I'm ready to move on to Nebraska when you are, Troy.
Then let's move on. This could be the most intriguing talk of the day right here. Mr. Frost, You know, we mentioned it earlier. New sheriff in town, Nebraska. Actually, we were a little surprised, too, at where Nebraska finished, Kevin. We thought they would do a little better in the conference. We thought that they'd go out and, you know, be competitive with teams. Maybe not, you know, win that division, but there's no way. I mean, if you would have told me at the beginning of last year that they would have been tied with Rutgers, I would have said, right. Yeah, what are you smoking today?
Yeah.
But they just really collapsed, just literally collapsed last year. And that's why we're talking about them on day 2 of our preview, and we're only going over 4 teams. So take it away, give the wrap-up on Nebraska, and I'll give a few points on what I think we're going to see this year.
Just to give fans a little heads up as to what Scott Frost did at UCF prior to his time at Nebraska. He played at Nebraska. But so coached at UCF. When he walked in the door, his team went 0-12, not his team. UCF went 0-12 the year before he got there. His first year there, he turned them from 0-12 to 6-6. Okay, that's respectable. Then in year 2, at UCF, they went 13-0 last year. That's it. That's his time at UCF. Turned a 0-win team into 6-6, and then 13-0 and beat Auburn in the bowl game. It's very hard to do better than that at any program, let alone a program that won 0 games. To go from winless to perfect in 2 years is absurd. So there's a reason why people are very high on Scott Frost. He not only can recruit, he got decent recruits to UCF, obviously not, 5-star guys left and right, but got good enough guys to play against the Auburns of the world and beat them, obviously, and to beat the other 12 teams they played last year. But they could compete with anybody. I wouldn't say they were the best team in college football. We'll never know that because the college football playoff didn't have them. But in any case, they could compete with anybody. They proved that. So what can he do at Nebraska? I'm sure he can get Nebraska to a level where they can at least compete with anybody. I don't think that's ridiculous. Do I think that he's going to turn them into 9-3 this year and then 13-0, 14-1 next year? No, I don't. I think it's going to take a little more time because I think things are different in the Big Ten. But at the same time, I don't think it's ridiculous to think that he turns it around pretty quickly because it's Nebraska. And people around that region can listen to their parents about how fantastic Nebraska was because kids nowadays, 16, 17, 18 years old, they're not going to know Nebraska as being great. They're not at all. That was like a late 90s, 2000, 2001 thing, which when these kids are being born now that are high school recruits. So they don't know Nebraska dominance, but they have, if you're around the region, obviously Nebraska fandom is strong around that region. So they know about it. You've got a hot coach coming in, and where did he choose to coach? He chose to coach at Nebraska. So it's interesting. I think he's going to turn them over quickly, not as quickly and drastically as he did at UCF. That's my overall thought on him. I think he's fantastic. I'm sure he'll do a really nice job. But give him a little bit of time. That's all. That's my quick take on Scott Frost. Last year, offensive numbers were pretty solid. They couldn't run the football, though. So total offense, scoring offense, passing offense, they were pretty solid. Couldn't run the ball. Defensively, they were atrocious. That was Nebraska in a nutshell. They get 5 offensive guys back. They get 7 defensive guys back. Again, what does that mean if your defense was very bad a year ago to get 7 of them back? I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, you've got a whole new system, whole new bunch of coaches coming in. So it's a wait-and-see approach. Scott first, not really his first recruiting class, but what he's bringing in year one is a number 22 class nationally. There's 5 4-stars in there. Most notably, again, it's a quarterback. And it's the number 7 ranked dual threat quarterback in the country, Adrian Martinez, who, if you're a legitimate Nebraska fan and you watch their spring game, you know what Adrian Martinez did in that game. He looked fantastic. Not to say that he's going to look that way in every single game, but with Scott Frost, who knows how to utilize a quarterback like him, I expect this freshman to be the starter week 1, and I'm sure he will be dynamic, and I'm sure he will be exciting to watch, and I'm sure Nebraska will be very interesting to watch offensively.
Well, again, the thing with this, Kevin, is you got a new coach coming in, and kind of like the story I shared in the beginning. Yeah. I'm not losing. I'm turning this program around. This is the way that it's going to be. The best players are going to play. You mentioned 7 guys coming back on defense. That doesn't mean 7 guys are starting on defense. Scott Frost is going to do what he needs to do to turn that program around. And I mentioned what I really like about coaches is that, especially in the college level, you can go and you can recruit. And you're going to recruit guys, and I'm not going to compare Frost to Chris right now. But Paul Chryst from Wisconsin, probably doesn't get accolades of many people because it's Wisconsin football, even though they had a great year last year. If you look at what Paul Chryst does, it's not a lot of 5-star recruits, Kevin. How does he win? He wins with a system. They have an identity. And that's what Scott Frost is going to build at Nebraska. It's something that they lost. We talked about it last year on this show. What is the problem with Nebraska? They don't have an identity. What is Nebraska going to do when they line up across from you? I don't know. Who knows what they're going to do? Try a little of this, try a little of that. And I'm not saying that in a good way. As a football team, you need to have an identity of what you do really well and how you want to do it really well. I'll flip over to Wisconsin. We know Wisconsin is going to have an average quarterback with a great offensive line and about 10 running backs that can step into the starting lineup and compete for a Heisman at some point. That's Wisconsin football, right, Kevin? And
yep.
They've probably got a running back that's fourth on the depth chart. That probably could be a really good starting running back anywhere else in the country. But he chose Wisconsin because of the way Paul Chryst recruits and the big burly offensive line that someday he hopes to run behind. Scott Frost will give Nebraska an identity. What it will be, we'll have to wait and see. But the best guys are going to play, and I liked how you put it. Everybody's expecting Nebraska all of a sudden, whoa, we got Scott Frost. Next year might not be much better.
No.
You might have another win or two, but you're not going to be much better, at least in my opinion, record-wise. Will you be more competitive on the football field? Yes. But I was looking at Nebraska, Kevin, and these fans that are thinking bowl game, that might be stretching it out just a little bit. That's all I got.
I think they can make a bowl game. I'll say that. Much better than that? No. I don't think they get to 8 wins. I think 7's pushing it even. But to win 6, just looking at, I think offensively they're going to be very interesting because I really believe in this Adrian Martinez kid and what Scott Frost is going to get from him. I really do. And at wide receiver, they've got 3 guys that can contribute. Stanley Morgan is a really good receiver. J.D. Spielman was a freshman a year ago, showed promise. Tyjon Lindsey was a big recruit as a freshman a year ago. He's got talent as well. With this Martinez kid, I think offensively they'll be just fine. Defensively, that'll be a question. But so will they get in these 35, 31 games and beat, Minnesota and Illinois and Purdue? I think so. I would trust Scott Frost and a talented offense with a dynamic quarterback to do that. I'm buying in to this quarterback and what Scott Frost is going to do with him for the next 4 years. I'm all in. But again, defensively, they've got issues for sure. You've got names coming back, but they're not fantastic names. Again, they were very bad a year ago defensively, and apparently my dog thinks they were bad defensively as well. But in any case, I'm going to look through their schedule as well, and I did a quick peek before. But so you've got a lot of names here. I think Colorado was the second game. You've got Akron, Colorado, and Troy starting this off for 2018. So to be 3-0 wouldn't be ridiculous to me. Then they travel to Michigan. You get Purdue at home. I think they can win that game. At Wisconsin, at Northwestern. Those will be tough. You get Minnesota at home, at Ohio State. That'll be tough. You get Illinois at home, Michigan State at home. Will be interesting. Iowa on the road. I think you've got quite a few winnable games in there. Akron, Colorado, Troy, Purdue at home, Minnesota at home, Illinois at home. I mean, those are 6 that right now I would favor them to win. So I think it's possible for sure to get to a bowl game. But I'm very excited to see this offense. And I think we're going to see a lot of 35-31, 38-32 type games where it's like, my God, this offense is already fun to watch, but defensively they need to figure things out. And I'm sure they'll get better soon. But, again, can you expect a lot from this team year 1, year 2? Probably not. But they'll be fun to watch offensively. That's my quick take on.
Well, you mentioned, Kevin, the high scoring, and that'll be great against the middle of the pack teams, the Minnesotas, the Purdues, the other teams that are in the same class as them. But when you start getting to the likes of a Michigan and Ohio State and a Wisconsin,
yeah,
they're not putting 30 points up. Could they? Yeah, they could. Highly unlikely. And part of the reason is that those teams I just mentioned, if that offense is that good, what are those teams going to do? They're just going to pound the ball right down their throat and control the clock and keep their offense on the sideline. And so then they're going to get into a game where those teams I just mentioned, they're going to put 28 or 31 up, and then the other side of the ball, Nebraska's going to have to hope that they can score every time they get the ball. And I don't know if that'll happen in year one in a new system. Eventually, though, like you, I'm bought into Scott Frost. I think it was a great hire. I think this guy's going to do great things at Nebraska. You just got to give him time because you've now come to the Big Ten. We brought it up on this show. We think the Big Ten is probably the best conference in America, top to bottom. You don't have gimme games, especially in 7 through 10. Again, you mentioned winnable games. Winnable games for Nebraska, but guess what, Kevin? From my standpoint, also winnable games for Minnesota, for Purdue, for Northwestern, for Iowa. Winnable games for them, too.
Yeah.
So it's a coin flip. But again, you've got a new coach in Scott Frost and a good coach that I think is going to do some really good things. That's all I got.
Yeah, I'll move on. They'll be an interesting watch. That's at the least. Purdue finished 8th in the conference a year ago. You could say tied for 7th with Iowa, although Iowa had a better overall record. Purdue last year was 7-6. They won their bowl game. It was the first year of Jeff Brom as head coach. This is the second year. And there was, let me see here. I know I've got it somewhere here. Let me run through. Here we go. So this was a quote from an opposing Big Ten assistant coach. This is Exhibit A of how the right coach can change everything. That program was a joke the last couple of years. Now look, what a job by Jeff Brom. They called Purdue a joke. And last year, 7-6, 4-5 in conference. I'm sure if a tip ball goes their way, you can say it was 5-4. Just a hunch. He did well year one. I liked the hire initially because he's, again, one of these guys, and not to say that Scott Frost can't coach defense, not to say that Jeff Brom can't coach defense. Jeff Brom is known for throwing an offense on the field and doing well with quarterbacks. And he did well at Purdue a year ago. And they had 2 guys that we learned could play quarterback at Purdue a year ago. Unfortunately, 2 guys can play quarterback, and so there's a quarterback controversy, and neither of them are fantastic. But they're playable. They're not going to throw away games against teams that they shouldn't. I think they're fine quarterbacks, but it's a controversy that Troy and I have gone over, I believe, a couple times already in this offseason, talking about 2 quarterback systems and Purdue in particular, and Jeff Brom has already said, hey, if playing both quarterbacks is the right thing to do, we'll do it. And to me, it's kind of a crock, but it is what it is. Can it work? If worked to a T perfectly and they both understand their roles going into the game and everything's hunky-dory, sure. Absolutely. But in this type of situation, it's not that way. But, again, year one for him was, you could say, a success. They went to a bowl game. They won their bowl game. They almost went over 500 in Big Ten play, which for Purdue, you'll take that, realistically. They, in terms of rankings a year ago, they were fine across the board. They returned 8 guys offensively, only 4 guys defensively, 4 offensive linemen return. Let's see here. His first full recruiting class was 11th in the Big Ten, no 4 stars, which I think you can basically expect from Purdue. I mean, maybe they'll get a 4-star, 1 year and not get it the next year. I think that's just Purdue in a nutshell, honestly. The big thing to me, though, Sindelar at quarterback, Bluff at quarterback. Who's the quarterback? Sindelar can throw it better. Bluff has legs. Bluff is the senior. That's what it is, realistically. A year ago, the big thing for Purdue, though, talking about Jeff Brom and his offense and having a couple capable quarterbacks, they had a new defensive coordinator that Brom brought along. Scoring defense, 2 years ago, they were 117th in the country, obviously, atrocious. Last year, Jeff Braun's this new defensive coordinator's first year at Purdue, from 117th to 24th in scoring defense. That's quite the leap. Again, though, you've got 4 returning starters. So it's going to be, okay, now what do we do? Repatching much of this defense. Their schedule as a whole starts with Northwestern, August 30th. That's why we're trying to get these previews out by August 27th, so that, everyone can listen to their favorite teams and the entire Big Ten, if you so please, at thegruelingtruth.net. Follow our show on Twitter at youngsteroldman, all one word. That's where we put all of our shows. But so Purdue's schedule, again, it starts with Northwestern. You've got a few cupcakes in there. You get Ohio State, Wisconsin at home. You're on the road at Nebraska, at Michigan State. But overall, again, is winning 6 games, getting to a bowl game possible? I think so. I think you've got 2 quarterbacks that you can somewhat rely on coming back. Defensively, obviously, the coordinator knows what he's doing on that side of the ball, but he's going to have to patch it up a bit. This is just another middle-of-the-road Big Ten team, but it'll be interesting to see what Braun does in his second year offensively with these quarterbacks, how the 2 quarterbacks play it out. It'll be an interesting team. Again, are they going to compete with Wisconsin and Penn State and Michigan State and Michigan and Ohio State? All those top dogs? Probably not. But can they beat anyone outside of those top dogs? Can they even upset one of those top dogs one Saturday this year? Absolutely. I think it's possible. Do I expect it? No. But I think it's possible. I think it's possible for this team to go to back-to-back bowl games and say, hey, we won 7 games again. Repatching our defense. We've got a couple quarterbacks. One of them's a junior, one's a senior. So next year there shouldn't be any controversy. You should have your senior quarterback ready to go next year. But I think this program is trending in the right direction. That's my little nutshell on Purdue.
Well, I agree with you. And, the one thing, Kevin, about Jeff Braun going to Purdue, traditionally Purdue has not been, how do I put it? Purdue has not traditionally been a team, like when you look at Big Ten and the way that the Big Ten conference is, they've never been that great defense, power running team. And that's what you think about when you think about the Big Ten. And you think back to all the years of Purdue, even when they were having success, it was all about quarterback play.
Yeah.
So they have 2 good quarterbacks. And I think we brought this up during the basketball season with the new hires in the Big Ten. You can't change the landscape of the conference when you're a coach. You can bring your style of play in, but you better figure out how to win within the conference. You said it so eloquently. I love saying that to you, youngster. Eloquently.
Thank you.
That Purdue can battle and beat any of the middle-tier teams. They can just outscore them. And like you said, they weren't terrible defensively.
No.
But when you look at the top teams, the Wisconsins, the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Michigans, they all have some resemblance of a very good running attack.
Yeah.
I don't care what conference you're in, whether it's the Big Ten, whether it's the ACC, whether it's the SEC, whether it's the MAC. To be a dominant team, you have to have a resemblance of a running game. You have to have that threat. Now, does it have to be the traditional, we're going to line you up with it in the I formation, hand it off to you, run behind the big burly line like Wisconsin? No. We talked about it in the NFL when we do our radio shows. Today's running backs, teams are looking for that running back that's going to run for 1,200 yards and catch 60 balls out of the backfield. Those are sought-after running backs. But you have to have some resemblance of a running back. And if Purdue can do that, you mentioned the quarterback play. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's there. And they got better defensively. I think they're going in the right direction. But right now, Kevin, this team to me, could they be on the outside of the bottom tier looking at the top? Yeah, they could be right there. Could they pull off a major upset this year? They could. Offensively, if one of those defenses that we mentioned that are near the top has an off day, which doesn't happen very often, but it could. Ohio State did last year. Not rubbing the salt in the wounds, Kevin. But no, Ohio State, it happened against Iowa.
Yeah, it's a game I'll bring up all year long. No one thought Iowa was going to beat Ohio State by 40 points.
And defensively, Ohio State just had a bad game, and then look how they ended the year. It's not like Ohio State was like, oh, yeah, look at you, tore up our defense. We're bad defensively. They had a bad game, and what do you chalk it up to? Who knows? Who knows? It was an anomaly. It was a one-time thing. Could that happen for Purdue next year? Sure. Everything's clicking one day. All the stars align. The moon aligns. Everything aligns. And, bam, Purdue has an upset. But as far as Purdue goes, they're a middle-of-the-pack team, youngster. That's all I got.
Yeah, absolutely. The last team that we'll get to, and let me mark this to make sure that I've got this right here as far as timekeeping goes. Iowa was the 7th. Again, you could say 8th, tied for 7th, I guess would be politically correct, with Purdue. But they had the better overall record. As far as rankings go, offensively, defensively, total scoring, rushing, passing, all that good stuff, they were fine. Nothing spectacular. And it seems like anytime we talk about Iowa, whether it's during the season, off season, whatever, we this is my thought anyway, that we're both more down on Kirk Ferentz than we are up on Kirk Ferentz. Because we see what Wisconsin does and we see what Iowa does. And it's like, why can't you be Wisconsin? I think it's fair to say that much of the country, much of the Big Ten fans out there can somewhat point at Purdue and say, yeah, you're not that good. You can point at Rutgers and say, you're not that good. Minnesota, Indiana, Maryland, Illinois, you're just not that good. Once you get to this team we're talking about here in Iowa and the teams past Iowa, the top 6 teams, especially from a year ago, these are teams that routinely knock on the door of the top 25 or are in the top 25. Whether it's Iowa, whether it's Northwestern, whether it's basically the Big 5, I guess you can call it now. I think the coaches poll came out, and I know, Troy, you love how much coaches polls mean in early August. But in terms of rankings, I think there was, 3 in the top 9, 4 in the top 11, whatever it is from the Big Ten. The Big Ten, again, has a lot of very good teams at the top, but there are teams like Iowa, there are teams like Northwestern, I think Nebraska, starting basically this year. You're going to have these teams that are obviously better in terms of talent than teams like Purdue and Indiana and Illinois, and I think Iowa's one of them. But so it's like, why can't you get to Wisconsin's level? And again, I think both Troy and I are more down on Kirk Ferentz than we are up. And again, I look recruiting-wise, and what do they have bringing in for 2018? Iowa, 2018, number 41 class nationally, number 8 in the Big Ten, 0 4-stars. Wisconsin has a 4-star. Why can't you? Wisconsin has a 4-star next year already. They have a 5-star next year already. Why can't you? It's just, to me, the acceptance, I guess, and there are some fans that don't accept it, but there are some fans that are with Kirk Ferentz till the day they die, and I just don't get it because it's constantly just 8-5 football. Occasionally, once in a blue moon, you'll hit 10 wins, and occasionally, once in a while, you'll hit 5. But usually, you're right in there, snug as a solid team at 8-5 or 8-4. If you win your bowl game, say you go 9-4, whatever it is, it's just solid football, and there's never, it seems like, any improvement from a 2, 3, 4, 5-year stretch where you get some good recruiting class in, or you get a decent recruiting class in that you coach up, and that recruiting class turns into something special, which Mark D'Antonio has done at Michigan State. And I know Troy, I just heard Troy ding out of the call, but I'll say it again. As soon as he comes back in, it'll be very soon. But what Mark D'Antonio did at Michigan State, that's another program that it's like Michigan State's not Michigan in terms of tradition. Michigan State's not Ohio State in terms of tradition. And right now, is Michigan State Wisconsin? They're not. Wisconsin's really built something special, I think. And they showed the country that last year, only losing one game and beating a top 10 team in the bowl game at their place a year ago in the Orange Bowl in Miami. Wisconsin's very solid going forward. They're not going anywhere. But so it's like Michigan State, you see these runs that Michigan State has of winning 2 Big Ten titles in 3 years. You know, they've done that before. Michigan State has been at the top of the conference. They've played in a college football playoff. That's what Iowa dreams of having. And it seems like Iowa can never put together a 2 to 3 year stretch like Michigan State has done, or almost for the last 15 years. It seems like what Wisconsin has done. You know, I think Wisconsin is the most consistent middle tier program that has just gotten the most out of everything. That's Wisconsin. But so Troy, I was talking about how Iowa just can't seem to get to Wisconsin's level, and another team that I thought of was Iowa can't seem to get to Michigan State's level. And what Mark D'Antonio has done there in these 2 to 3 year stretches where it's like they'll win the Big Ten.
Fire D'Antonio!
That's exactly what I was looking for. I told the fans as I was bringing up Mark D'Antonio, I heard Troy ding out. He's going to ding back in. I'll bring it up again. But I didn't say the words fire D'Antonio. I knew you'd say them for me, Troy. So I appreciate that greatly.
Did you hear anything I said before when I interrupted you? Because I'm on the part of my drive now where I'm going in hills and valleys in that wonderful northeast terrain that I have to drive home in every day. So I apologize to the listeners for dinging in and out, but it's going to happen again, and it's probably going to happen shortly, so I better get to my point. Did you hear anything I said when I interrupted you? Maybe I didn't even get to interrupt you because I fell off the call.
No, you didn't.
So I wanted to talk about Kirk Ferentz real quickly. I think he's a good guy, but I think he needs to leave Iowa. And the reason, Kevin, everything's vanilla. I think the message is stale. Iowa has no identity right now. We mentioned it on the show about identities. What does Iowa bring when they line up against you? Is it going to be a power formation? Are they a running team? Are they an option team? Are they going to play great defense? And again, he's a Big Ten coach. He's a professional. He's not going to just, I'm going to air quote, go through the motions. But I think the message has become stale at Iowa. I think he needs to move on. New scenery. I think new scenery would do good things for both him and the University of Iowa. That's all I got, youngster.
Yeah. Again, they don't have the consistency of Wisconsin, and they once in a while have those 10-2 years, but it's not like a Michigan State run where they'll go 11-1 and win the Big Ten and go into the college football playoff and finish top 5 in the country. They don't do that, and they don't do that for a 2, 3, 4 year run like D'Antonio has done, like Wisconsin has done for the last 10, 15 years, where it seems like they're always knocking on the door of Ohio State and Michigan, and a lot of times better than Michigan in recent history. But they're never at that level. Like you said, whether it's the message getting stale, whatever it is, and I'm with you completely on that point. I think Kirk Ferentz is fine as a coach. I don't think he's bad. I think he's above average. But that's just what Iowa is. It seems like consistently above average. And if you're fine with 8-5, you're fine with 9-4 consistently, 7-6.
You know, Kevin, do you remember that show that we did where we brought up I think it was our recap, are Iowa fans just complacent?
Right.
Are they just expecting this? And I think part of it is they're hoping. They're hopeful. Because if you remember, when Kirk Ferentz first went there, he had a ton of success.
Yeah.
The NFL wanted him. They were trying to lure him away from Iowa, and he was loyal. But you know what? That loyalty now, the loyalty has to change. It's about winning.
And now we're losing you, Troy. We're losing you on the call as far as connection goes. But Iowa, I guess, going more into them this year, talked about Kirk Ferentz, talks about how he's above average, and that's what it is. And like Troy was saying, okay, Kirk Ferentz had a lot of success early, but then it turned into a lot of 9-4 and 8-5 and 7-6 and 6-6, and oh my God, we missed out on a bowl game. But then next year he comes back and they go 8-4, and it's like, oh, okay, we're good again. We're good again. We're not great, and then it's just frustrating because when you're Purdue, when you're Illinois, when you're Rutgers, and you go 4-8, you go 5-7. Oh my God, we made it to a bowl game 6-6. That's fine. And maybe I'm hypocritical in saying that. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about when I say that. But if you're Iowa, you're Wisconsin, you're Michigan State, you should go 9-3. You should have those 2-3 year stretches where you get the right bunch of kids and you coach them up and you win the Big Ten one year. And now that almost guarantees you for one of the 4, soon to be 8, I'm sure, college football playoff spots. I'm sure it's going that way. And so you see Wisconsin doing it. You see Michigan State doing it. Again, these are programs that are not Michigan, Ohio State, what Penn State is now, constantly getting 5 stars. That's not Iowa. That's fine. But get the coach that can propel you to what Wisconsin is, to what Michigan State is. That's what it comes down to. I'm done with my point, Troy. I know you dinged out of yours again. If you feel like talking.
No, I'm gonna ding out again. So I'm not gonna add anything. My whole thing with Iowa is I think it comes down to getting a whole new staff, getting some coaching in there to be able to go out and recruit players and become competitive in the Big Ten. You proved that you could do it at one time. You just need to do it again. And I don't think Kirk Ferentz is the guy for the job at Iowa. I think he can coach somewhere else. I just think it's time for a change. That's all I got.
Yeah. To move into this year, I've got a lot of it's actually somewhat Nebraska-like, I guess. It's different, though. But in any case, returning 7 starters offensively, 4 defensively. They had Josie Jewell as a linebacker was phenomenal a year ago. He's in the NFL now. The defensive back, who I cannot think of his name right now, Josh Jackson. What was he? First-round pick, second-round pick, whatever it was. Obviously, first-team All-American in the country. They had talented guys defensively a year ago, very talented, and some none better at their position a year ago in Jewell and Jackson. Those 2 were phenomenal. A linebacker, corner, they were great. They have to be replaced. Again, 4 guys returned defensively. They have to be replaced for sure. So, again, you got quarterback Nate Stanley returns as a junior. Last year he had really good games, like against Ohio State. There was another one he threw for over 350, 400 yards against some good team that is, again, blanking my mind at the second, but he had his really good games. He showed it a year ago. He's talented, for sure. He also had really bad games. He's an inconsistent college sophomore quarterback. That's what he was a year ago. But he is talented. I expect bigger things, more consistency this year. And during my time at Atlanta 10, which the site has gone down, but during my time writing at Atlanta 10, I did a few articles. And one, I remember in particular, it was like an Athlon Sports Illustrated, whatever it was, rated the top tight end units in the country. And at number 1 in the entire country was Iowa. In Noah Fant, T.J. Hawkinson, they were literally number 1 in the country in terms of tight end core, group, duo, whatever you want to call it. They were fantastic. They were really good a year ago. They're both back this year. So Stanley's got some guys to throw to as safety blankets. As far as wide receivers are concerned, I'm just looking at the depth chart right here. Not a bunch of huge names that are popping out to me. But offensively, they should be good. They lose Akrom Wadley. They lose another guy who transferred in a year ago. They had a 1-2 punch at running back a year ago that wasn't fantastic, but they were talented. They just didn't get, again, the most out of them that I think.
Here's the thing, Kevin. You brought it up, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't in a dead zone, and I'm fine now.
Yeah.
You say they should be fine offensively, and I disagree. This is why I disagree. And people might disagree with me, too, because you say, well, you can't be predictable. What is Iowa trying to do, Kevin? This is where I don't think they'll be okay. You look at Ohio State. You're an Ohio State fan. You know what they're trying to do offensively, right? So does every other team in the Big Ten. They just do it better than everybody else. What does Wisconsin want to do offensively? Everybody in the Big Ten knows they just do it better. The good teams in this conference, Kevin, they basically tip their hand to every other team. Like, this is what we're going to do, and we're just going to do it better than you. And Iowa doesn't have that. They don't. Until they figure out what they want to do offensively, we'll tinker with this, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do that. It's not going to work to me. So can they have games like they had against Ohio State? Yeah, because I'll put it this way, Ohio State's defense put the bed. It wasn't because Iowa's that much better than Ohio State. If they were, they would have been in the national playoff. They had one good day where things clicked. But the dominant teams in this conference, Kevin, all have an offensive identity, and they're much better than every other team that does it. And teams don't care if you know what they're running offensively. Yeah, you're going to put wrinkles in it. You're going to have play action. But it goes back to what I just said. All the dominant teams have some resemblance of a running game, so you can use play action. Heck, even good old Hornibrook over at Wisconsin can use play action. And every once in a while, he's good at it. Not all the time, but every once in a while. I just wanted to throw that out there, youngster, because I look at Iowa, and it's almost to me, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, because I like Kirk Ferentz. I think he's a good guy. This year's team almost reminds me of Nebraska last year, where the expectations are at a certain level, not championship level, but maybe a bowl level, 8 wins, 9 wins, and the wheels fall off. And that's where we thought Nebraska would be last year in that 7, 8, 9 win category, and look what happened. I see the same thing happening in Iowa at some point. That complacency of 7, 8, 9 wins. One year the wheels are falling off this program, Kevin. And it's, again, not because Ferentz is bad, but you mentioned it earlier. He hasn't done anything recruiting-wise. And if you're going to stay stalemate and just say, well, we're going to force guys into my system or this guy will fit, eventually the inmates are going to rule the roost. And it's going to cost him his job because they're not getting better. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to throw it out there because I don't think they're going to be getting better this year. I don't see it. Take it away, youngster.
I don't think they get better this year, but their schedule is as favorable as you can probably ask for it to be, unfortunately, which it seems like every other year Iowa has this favorable schedule where they go, oh, my God, we went 9-3. Oh, my God, we went 10-2. It's not because Iowa was that great that year. It seems like their schedule was crap, and Colin Cowherd is a Fox radio host who is known for bashing them nationally because their schedule is always crap, whether it's luck of the draw or whether it's because they play Northern Illinois, Iowa State, and Northern Iowa in the non-conference. I honestly think that Kirk Ferentz lives on getting 3 games, easy to go, ready to roll, and then you just go 5-4 in the Big Ten. Hey, look, there's our 8 wins. Hey, look, we pulled off an upset. We went 9-3. Wow, that's a good year. No, it's not. No, it's not. Not because you beat 3 cupcakes, you beat up on the bottom of the Big Ten, and you pulled off 1 upset. That's not a good year. Going to whatever bowl game it is where the number 5 Big Ten team plays the number 6 Big 12 team. That's not cool. It's not if you're Iowa. It's not. It's just not good enough. It shouldn't be good enough. Apparently it is because he's not getting fired. And I'm not saying he should get fired, but like we've both said here, we expect more. And maybe we're unrealistic there. I don't think we are. But we expect more. And it seems like every other year they've got this crap schedule that plays into their 9-win, 10-win season. And I'm on that bandwagon where it's like I think they personally tried to do it, where they schedule Northern Illinois, Iowa State, and Northern Iowa in their non-conference. And then they get Wisconsin at home, you get Northwestern at home, you get Nebraska at home, you get Maryland at home. Gee, who do they go on the road to play? Oh, look, they played Minnesota, Indiana, Penn State, there's one tough one, at Purdue, at Illinois. It's like, who should beat them? Who's the team that it's like, oh, yeah, that team will win? For sure. Wisconsin should beat them, for sure. It's at Iowa, though. It's not going to be a doormat game. At Penn State, they should lose that one. Other than that, if they won the other 10, that wouldn't shock me. And not because Iowa's great. I think they're above average. I wouldn't call them good this year because they've got questions at running back. Nate Stanley is not going to be able to build off play action at all. I think they'll be very average running the football. I think they've got a talented quarterback who's not fantastic, but he's talented. You've got two very talented tight ends. But at the end of the day, your defense, you've got to replace all these good guys. I think they'll be an above-average team. But schedule-wise, I think you can see a lot of wins, honestly. That's how I see it. You got to replace all three linebackers, basically your entire secondary, new running back core. But in the end, who do you play? That's what it comes down to in a little 12-game schedule, especially on this side where you constantly compete against some of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Not to call out one side of the Big Ten in one division. It has nothing to do with the schools themselves. It's just how they depended or decided on the divisions being divided. But one division of the Big Ten is better consistently than the other division. That's just the way it is. And Iowa got the luck of the draw in terms of where they are. And for whatever reason, it seems like they always get the Ohio State at home or the Penn State at home, or they only play one of the top two teams, and then they play the other crappy teams. I don't know how that works. But it seems like when the stars align, it matches perfectly for when their schedule should be really easy. I don't know. That's my take on Iowa this year. If they went 10-2, it wouldn't shock me. Realistically, talent-wise, they should go probably 7-6, 7-5. 7-5 talent-wise in a 12-game schedule. But with
Kevin,
this schedule,
even with that easy schedule, I'm just telling you, this team and the makeup and everything going on reminds me of a Nebraska debacle.
Yeah,
I know it's an easy schedule, but we mentioned that in the Big Ten, you got to go to play. You've got to be ready to play every Saturday. And if you're not ready to play, you're going to walk out of that stadium with a loss, whether it's home or away. So I know you said it's an easy schedule. There's just something telling me that something's going to go down at Iowa. And it's just like the Nebraska thing to me. But, let's move on. We spent a long time on the first three. Let's wrap up with team number 4, youngster.
Well, that was team number 4.
Oh, was it?
We had Rutgers, Nebraska, Purdue, and then we finished with Iowa.
Oh, yeah. See, so the heat is getting to my brain.
Yeah, we spent a long time on Iowa. We spent a decent amount of time on Rutgers, actually. We were on Rutgers for like 20 minutes. But, yeah, that's when did we start this show? This is an hour and 10 in. So
I can't even touch him. I'm getting old, and in my old age, see what happens, and all this heat's just getting to me. But another great show. You know what, youngster? I'm going to miss you next week. Yeah. I'm going to miss you, but I got to say on this show publicly, congratulations to you and the future Mrs. Youngster.
Thank you.
I wish you well. I wish I could be there, but unfortunately, I told you, due to my work commitments, I was unable to make things fly to be able to make the wonderful trip down to Florida. But definitely wish you the best. I know we're going to talk later in the week, but I want to do it on this show because not everybody's going to listen to every other show. So congratulations, Mr. Youngster. Have a great wedding day, and then I will talk to you on this show in 2 weeks. Anything else to add to the fans?
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Troy. Like you said, we do a number of shows together. Follow us at Youngster Old Man on Twitter. That's all one word. Check our stuff out at thegruelingtruth.net. In any case, 2 weeks from now, both Troy and I will get back at these reviews next week. Again, Troy will be talking about things like, if you want, we already talked about Urban Meyer.
Well, I think I'm going to expand on the Urban Meyer thing, Kevin, because now since we did our show, you got Urban Meyer coming out talking about that he did the proper things or blah 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 blah. And you know me, this is a passionate subject for me. So it's probably going to be a little bit of Urban Meyer next week, and then if anything else is breaking news in the Big Ten. Heck, by the time I do the show, Urban Meyer may not be the coach.
Yeah, but I will say, again, my last thing here, 2 weeks from now, Troy and I keeping this up, previewing the 2018 season for these teams a little more in depth. We're talking about Northwestern. We're talking about Michigan. We're talking about Penn State. We're talking about Michigan State. Now we're getting to some good teams, some seriously good teams, not teams that vanilla their way into 9 wins, like I think Iowa could. But Northwestern won 10 games a year ago. Michigan, they'll be better this year. Penn State, 11 wins a year ago. Michigan State, 10 wins a year ago. We're getting to the good stuff. 2 weeks from now, Troy and I, and I'll be a married man then. But things will be changed 2 weeks from now for sure. But we'll get back at you guys with seriously good Big Ten football teams, to say the least. And this is why I think this conference is the best in the country. Not the middle of the pack is perfectly fine and better than most middle of the packs out there, if not the best middle of the pack in the country. But there are so many really good teams in this conference this year. I'm excited to talk about them all with you, Troy.
All right, folks, hope you enjoyed the show today. If you want to find the youngster on Twitter and wish him a happy marriage, find him at Kid Cunny. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day, everyone.